Hello and welcome to our 10th session in this modifier section, and in this section we are going to have a look at the displace modifier. So to begin with, I will come into the blender. You can see the default cube here. I will select it plus X and I am going to delete it. I will press Shift A and in the mesh now I am going to add a plane. I will press tab, and for my displace modifier to work correctly I need more geometry. So for that I will right click and choose subdivide, and I am going to subdivide it some 20 times so that I have more vertices over here. Now I will press tab, and now I will come over here and I am going to call this as displace vertex group example. So I will give it the name like this, and then I will select the camera and light and I will move it into the scene collection, and then for this collection I am going to call this as vertex group. Now selecting this plane, I will come into the modifier, and in the add modifier I will come into deform, and now I am going to add this fourth modifier, displace modifier. And as soon as I add the displace modifier, you can see that my entire plane jumped up and it got displaced by around 1 unit, as you can see here. The first displacement we are going to explore here is the vertex group display. So for this I will press tab and come into the edit mode, and I will come into the data modifier, and here in the vertex group I will create a new group and I am going to call this as displace, and I am going to press enter. Now here in the vertex selection I will just select all the vertices in this row, and I will press shift and select these vertices. Then I leave a gap of 2 and I will select the next 2 vertex line like this. I will leave a gap of 2, and with shift alt pressed I will click these 2 vertices line, leave 2 gap, these 2 vertices line, leave 2 gap, these 2 vertices line, and like this I have made a selection, and then I will come into this display and I will click assign. So once I have assigned it, I will click somewhere to deselect it, and when I click on select, these groups should be selected. This means that the vertex groups are correctly assigned. And now I will press tab, and now I will come into the modifier, and in the vertex group here I am going to select this displace group, and as soon as I select it, you can see that all the vertex that had been selected in our vertex group has been displaced by 1 unit. So you can see it has been displaced by 1 unit, and if required I can change the strength here. If I make it 0, displacement will be 0. Either I can move it negative down or positive up like this. And the next I have is the mid-level control, that is I can control this float by changing this mid-level, and I can change this and make it small or big like this. See, I can control it. So I will set this to 0.5. Now I can also control this by using the weight paint. So for that I will come here into weight paint, and you can now clearly see that all the areas that is present in the group displace is in red color. I will press numpad 7, come into the top view. I will press open square bracket and I will reduce the size like this, and I am going to paint one area over here like this. I will paint an area here like this. So as I paint here, you can see that this area is now getting added into our vertex group, and I will also select this. You can see these 2 areas are added. Now if I press tab, now if I come back here into the object mode, you can now see that this area has also been projected like this. I will come here and I will close this group, and in the scene collection I am going to add a new collection, and I am going to call this collection as number plate, and I will switch off this vector group, and in this number plate I will come here, press shift A, and I am going to add another plane here, and like last time I will press tab, right click, subdivide, and I will create some subdivisions of around 50 subdivisions. I will press tab, and now actually in the resources I have given you with a file called as numberplate.jpg. So I have given you this file. This is a file that we can create in Photoshop or in image editing software, wherein whichever area I want it to be embossed or has to be displaced, I have kept it black and other color is white. Now I will come over here and I will select this plane, and I am going to call this plane as now number plate, and then I will come into add modifier, and in deform I am going to add the displace modifier. And this time in the displace modifier I will come into this texture part where you are seeing new. I will click on new here, and I am going to call this texture as number plate, and then I am going to now click on this icon here, and when I click on this icon you will come into this texture tab, and you have the type which is set to image or movie. I come down here and you have this open icon. I will click on this open icon, and I will come to the folder where I have downloaded my resource file, this numberplate.jpg. I will select it and double click it. Now as soon as I add it, immediately you can see the projection happening here. See, you can see here the KA021234 area has totally been projected back. Now I will come into the modifier, and only thing is I will reduce the strength to around -1 to emboss it on the other side. You can now see these letters are embossed on the other side, and now if I want these numbers, you can see these numbers are pixelated. If I want these numbers to be little clearer, I can now come into this texture modifier, and here if you scroll down you have sampling, and in the sampling the size is actually set to 1, and if I change this size to 5, you can now see the edges become smooth, or if I change this to around 12, you can see these edges are becoming smooth. Or else if I need this to be more clear, I have to press tab and I have to subdivide it 1 or 2 more times, and then now if I come, you can now see that my text is now clear. You can see this text area completely embossed out. So I can come into the modifier and I can set this to around -0.4, and now you can see that my whatever area is black is getting embossed like this here. So I can now come here in the add modifier, come into generate, and I can add a subdivision surface to make it look smooth. So this is another application of this displace modifier. So now I am now going to next come here, and I am going to close this, and I am going to here switch off this number plate collection, and then in the scene collection I will now create a new collection, and I am going to call this as built-in texture displacement. And in this case I am now going to press Shift A, and in the mesh I am going to add, say for example, an icosphere, and I will come into subdivision and I am going to increase the subdivision to something like 6 times, so that I have maximum amount of subdivisions like this. Now I will press 1 and come into the front view. Again I will come into add modifier here, and in deform I am going to add the displace modifier. As soon as I add it, you saw that the entire icosphere got enlarged in size. Now I will click on new here. I am going to apply a texture, and I will come into the texture, and this time in the type, instead of image or movie, I will click here, and I am going to use various types of built-in textures available here, and the first one is the blend. Blend means this is going to create a gradation from black to white, and if you see this, you can see this is how our object is going to look. So now I will come here and I am going to call this as blend. I will press numpad 1, press GX, and I will move it to the side like this. Then I will press Shift D, duplicate it, press GX and move it here. And in the second case, I am now going to change this texture. See, now if I change this texture from blend to cloud, you can see both of the textures are changing. So if I want only this to change, I will come back to blend, and for the first one in the texture, I am going to call this as blend. I will select the second one, and you have one number of instances button here. You have to click here, and this is now going to become a new texture. This will be a copy now, and now I am going to call this as clouds, and now I will come over here and choose clouds. So when I choose clouds, you can see how the distortion is happening, and here I can adjust the size, and as I change the size, you can see how this is going to change, and depth, I can change the depth level, and I can make all these changes here. And in the noise, cloud noise, you have Blender original and original per lane and improved per lane. Then you have Voronoi F1, you have Voronoi F2, you have Voronoi F3. So you have different patterns here. So I will put it back to Blender original. So now, say for example, if you want to create some kind of a store or a structure like this, you can create it with the Displace modifier. Now next, I am going to come here and I am going to call this as clouds now. Then I will press Shift D, press X, and I will move it to the side, and this time I will again come here, press on this 2, I will make a copy of this, and next I am going to add this distorted noise, and I am going to call this as distorted. And then even here you can see how the sphere is getting modified now. I will come here and I also call this as distorted. Now next I will press Shift D, press X, and I will move it next. I will come over here and I will press again on this 2, and now I am going to add image or movie we have already added. I will add the magic, and when I add the magic, you get the distortion like this, and I am going to call this as magic, and also here I am going to call this as magic. Then I will move it here and I will again press Shift D, and along the X axis I will move this, and next here I will again click on this to create a new copy, and now instead of magic I am going to use marble, and I am going to call this as marble, and you can see how the displacement is happening in case of marble. Now here also I am going to call this as marble. Then again I will press Shift D, press X, and move it, and the next option again click here and make a new copy, and next I am going to choose this misgrave, and I am going to call this as misgrave, and also here also I will call this as misgrave. And next I will press GX and move it a little here. Next I will press again Shift D, press X, and move it to the side, and again I will make a copy of this, and instead of misgrave now I am going to add the noise. So when I add the noise, you can see how this is getting distorted, and I am going to call this now as noise, and here also I am going to call this as noise. Now next again I will press Shift D, press X, and move it to the side, and I will duplicate this by clicking on this number 2. I am going to click here on the noise, and I am going to use this stucky, and now you have a different kind of structure. I am going to call this as stucky, and also here I am going to name it as stucky, and then I will just press Shift D, press X, move it to the side, and again I will click on this, duplicate it, and I will come now add the Voronoi texture here, and you have a different kind of noise generated here. See, you have this, and I can come over here and I will call this as Voronoi, and also here I am going to call this as Voronoi, and then I will again press Shift D X and move it to the side, and I will again click on this and create a copy and come here and choose wood. So when I select wood, you can see how this is appearing, and I am going to call this as wood, and even here I am going to name this as wood. So I have now created a collection of all these cubes which are of different shapes depending upon the kind of texture added to it. Now I am going to close this built-in texture displacement group, and this collection I am going to switch it off, and I am going to come into scene collection, right click and create a new collection, and I am now going to call this as embossed artwork. And now in this case I will press numpad 1 and come into the front view. I will shift and mouse click and come into the center, and now I will press Shift A, and in the mesh I am now going to add a cylinder. Now only thing is, for this cylinder I am going to add about 128 vertices, so that I have maximum number of vertices. Then I will press tab and I will press S, and along the Z axis I will scale it by around 6 times, and then I am going to press Ctrl R. I will add a division and move it to the bottom somewhere here, and I am going to now come here, and with this edge selection tool I will press number 2 to get the edge selection tool. I will alt click on this edge, I will press S, and I will scale it up like this. Okay, I got a base like this. Then I am going to press Ctrl R and add another loop like this. I will move it to the top like this, and I will press numpad 1, and now I will alt click on the top edge, and I am going to now press S, and I am going to scale it up like this. So I got a structure like this, and next here I am going to add one more Ctrl R, and I am going to create 2 loop cuts. Click once and click again, and then press SZ, and I am going to scale it up like this. So I create an area like this, and in this area I am now going to press Ctrl R, and I am going to add multiple this kind of cuts. I will click once, twice, and I will come into loop cuts, and I am going to add about 100 cuts like this. So I have added 100 cuts here, and now here I am now going to come into my data center, and I am going to now create a new group, and I am going to call this as emboss, and I am going to come into vertex selection mode, and with this group selected I will click assign. So when I click assign, I have to click outside and see select and see whether it is getting selected. Okay, it is working. So this group I have created, and I have called it as emboss. If I press tab and come here, I have to do a carving of an artwork. This one you can come into sculpting and do it, or else you can use an image like this. So if I double click and show this, so I have this kind of texture, and I want this shape to be embossed on my pillar. So I take a black and white image of this, I will close this, and I will come into my this pillar. I will come here and I will call this cylinder as carved underscore pillar, and then I will now come into the modifier, and for this in the add modifier in deform I am going to add the displace modifier. And once I add the displace modifier, you can see everything has boomed up, it has become big. But here I will come into the vertex group and I will select emboss. So now only this area which I had selected has been applied with this displace. Now even in this case I am going to click new here and I am going to call this as artwork, and I am going to come into the texture, and even for this if I apply any of the textures like this, if I select this magic or this marble, you can see how my pillar will look in different options. So if I give wood, say it generates a texture like this. So you have different noise is going to create it like this. And now in this case I am going to come here and choose image or movie, and now I will come into open, and now I am going to select the artwork file that I showed you just now, pillar_artwork. I am going to select it. Now as soon as I select this, you are not seeing that kind of embossing here. This is because I have to now map my pillar structure to this image, and this is done using what we call as the UV editing. So I have to now come into UV editing, and I have, if I move on to the top here, and if you see here, I am already in, I have selected this emboss group and I have all the vertices present here, and on the left hand side in the image I will come and open my pillar_artwork image. And now with these things selected, I will come on the left hand side and I will press A to select all these vertices. I will press R90 and press enter. Now I will scale this like this. I will press GZ and move it down like this, and then I will press scale, and along the Y axis I will scale it up like this. I will press GZ and move it like this. Then yes, Y, and along the Y axis I will scale it up, so that this entire thing is covering my entire image. Like this I am going to create a UV map, and after I create this UV map, now I will come back to my layout, and here if you come into my modifier, in the modifier you have this coordinates which is set to local, and I am going to come here and choose UV. Now as soon as I choose the UV, you can see that carving appearing over here. See, you are seeing that carving. Only thing is this has been cut. I need it to be embossed. To make it embossed, I will come in the strength and I will give a negative value like -0.4, and now you can see that the flower and everything is embossed all around the pillar like this. See, you can see that emboss, and if you are seeing these things are very means is not clear, means I can now come into my, that is this texture here, and I can just come here and you have mapping, and here if I move down in sampling, I am going to set its size to something like 6, so that the edges are smooth now. And after this actually I want 2 sets of this. I doesn't want this to wrap around completely. I want 2 sets of this artwork, one on the front and one on the back, and for that I will come back to UV editing, and here if I now press S and along the X axis I will scale it by 2 times, press enter, and if I press GX and if I move it and place it like this. So now if I come back into the layout, and if you see this, you can now see that this embossing is appearing like this. See, you can see the emboss. I can come into the modifier and I will set this little less, -0.2. I will set it to -0.2, and if you want this emboss to be more clear, then what I have to do is I have to press tab, come into the edit mode, and here in the data I have selected this emboss group, and I will right click and I will add one more subdivision now, and if I press tab and come now this appears sharper and clear. And if required, I can come into the image here, I can move down, I can open the colors, I can move down and increase the contrast level like this and change it, and I can change the brightness level here, and also saturation is not going to work because this is a black and white image. And now you can see that I have this artwork appearing in front of my pillar. Now I will again come into modifier, and in add modifier I am going to come into generate, and I will add another subdivision surface over this. And when I add this, see, the machine is going to become slower. So be very careful when you add it, because now if you come into your statistics and if you see the number of vertices here selecting this, you have 2,06,000 vertices. So that's why you are seeing this, and this is now applied. So now this is appearing more smooth. So now I will open this subdivision surface and I will set this level to 2, and now you have a smooth pillar like this. So with this I will come into file now, and I will choose save as, and here I am going to now name this as 04_10 and call this as Displace Modifier, and I am going to click on save button. And if required, I will come here, and in matcap I am going to select a better view like this. So whenever you are using the displace modifier, remember, now all these things may not happen on a computer which has lesser power, or whenever you apply subdivision surface you may have to wait for about 30 seconds to 1 minute, or Blender might freeze, because in displacement modifier we consider it as a very expensive modifier, because every time you use it, it is going to generate huge number of polygons and faces, and so this kind of displacement is not actually practically not preferred, and we are going to use another kind of image displacement or texture displacement, which we are going to discuss it in our material section. We will conclude this session on the displace modifier, and in the next section we are going to have a look at our next modifier, which is the hook modifier.